The opinions expressed in the following program are not necessarily those of Eastlink Community TV, its sponsors, or partners.
Welcome back to another episode of the Unlikely Innovators. I'm Mike Commito, as always, joined by Steve Gravel, and This is the show where we talk to unlikely innovators, researchers, entrepreneurs, get to know their story and get to see where they came from. So today we're joined by Kim Brouzes, who is a powerhouse. She's an athletic therapist, an entrepreneur, CEO of Kinmetrix. Kim, we're so happy to have you on the show today.
Thank you for having me.
So before we talk about all the cool stuff that you're doing right now, what we wanted to ask you first was, what first drew you into the world of athletic therapy?
Good question, actually. So I was in high school at a time where we had grade 13 OACs. You guys are too young, probably.
I was the first cohort of the
grade 12?
Of the grade 12 double
there you
cohort,
go.
Yeah.
So it's young for people now to know what to take from high school. But back then, even though we had the extra year, I just remember friends of mine, they're going into law, they're going into teaching, they knew they were going into medicine. And I thought, oh my God, I have no idea what I'm going to do here. So I went to Laurentian. I had a wonderful 4 years at LU, took the kinesiology program, but I had I was lucky enough to be mentored under Wendy Hampson. So Wendy Hampson is an iconic AT that's probably, she's probably 40 or 50 years in the industry. She's gone now from Sudbury, unfortunately, but as a varsity athlete, I got to work under Wendy Hampson, and that's when the AT kind of started to grow as a possibility. So after university, I went to Kitchener-Waterloo for a year, and I worked in a double facility that had physiotherapy on one side and sports medicine on the other. So I did the physiotherapy piece first, and it was very kind of reoccurring. So it was the same thing, ultrasound, exercise, and no disrespect to the clinic or physios, it wasn't anything to do with that. It just wasn't me. It was very repetitive. And then I went into the AT side with the sports med docs, and the women's Olympic softball team was getting treated there. And I mean, people were screaming, and there was therapists yelling over top of athletes to fix a machine or a movement, and I thought, what a beautifully chaotic environment to heal in, and that's kind of where it stemmed for me. Is like, I like the chaos. The environment was completely chaotic, but the therapist knew everybody in there, knew about their lives, knew about their sports, and it was just exactly where it started for me.
That's unreal, and I should just tell everyone in the audience, I've been treated by Kim a few times, so the screaming makes a lot of sense for a different reason. But one thing that I found very interesting, when you started to treat me, you asked me what position I played, and I think that's something that's a bit, like, athletic therapy is very specialized, not just to the sport, but to the position.
Correct.
And athletes come in all shapes and sizes. Even like if you take a football team, you have a kicker all the way to an offensive lineman.
Yep.
Talk a bit about, that sort of dynamism in that trade. You have to be able to flip between different specialties, but also different body types.
Correct. So as an athletic therapist, one of the differences between us, and that's a common question, what's the difference between physio and ET? I can't really answer it because I never took physiotherapy, but the one thing I could say in terms of the strengths of an athletic therapist is we are the first line of defense. So we take an athlete from the pitch, field, the rink, whatever it is, and take them all the way back to therapy, rehab, and then back to their surface, right? So an athletic therapist is taught something that we call risk assessments, physiological profiles. So we need to know ethnic backgrounds, we need to know the turf that you're on, the surface you're on, the make of your skates, because they're all different, or your running shoes. So we're trained to be able to take even your equipment. I don't know if you remember back then, but I used to have to use a stitch-all and stitch things back together or fix grommets, right? So an athletic therapist has a very unique skill set, from being almost like an equipment manager all the way to the therapist. If you look at an African-American basketball player, let's say our NBA players, they typically have flat feet, not even fallen arches, flat feet. They have a high calf and a really long shin. So we know that Achilles ruptures and ankle sprains are going to be more likely in an NBA athlete than maybe in my lineman, right? So yeah, that is something that we're taught through school and something that we definitely carry on through our careers.
That's awesome. I can't tell you how many times, you know, it'd be the end of practice or something like that. There was almost a shorthand, you know, if you get hurt at practice or a game, it would almost be like our coach would be like, "Go see Kim."
Yeah.
You know, that was just the sort of shorthand. You know, you got to go get that looked at. You know, that's not something that we're just going to roll with. That needs to go get looked at. And I always, it was such a good thing to have as a resource because. You know, when you're coming up through high school and things like that, you don't have dedicated athletic therapy.
That's right.
But as you move on and you play like more organized sports, it's a bit of a game changer to have access.
Oh,
to
for
that,
sure.
Right? And I think it gave us a bit of an edge too.
Yep, absolutely.
Yeah.
We just wanted to ask you quickly before we go to break, just in terms of, we were talking off air, but after school, you mentioned the CFL. Where did you get your start? Where did you cut your teeth?
Oh, wow. So the nice thing about Sheridan, when I went to athletic therapy school, there was only 6 schools in all of Canada, 2 in Eastern Canada, 2 in Western Canada, and then 2 here. And we had one at Sheridan, which was at Oakville at the time, and one at York University. So in our programming, we had to, their first year, which was really 5th year, we had to work with a high school. And then you went to a university or semi-pro type thing, and then you tried to get your teeth basically into a professional league. Remember, it's a male-dominated industry. So Chris Puskas, who is a Sudbury guy, he's with the Ticats at the time. So I had the ability to work in football, and I had a really good experience with football already. And then, of course, we had access to, some people went with the Raptors, some people went with Toronto, the Leafs, and then, the funny thing is even though I had access to this stuff, my heart knew I was always coming back. Okay. Right? So the nice thing about Sheridan was we had access to all the teams basically in Southern Ontario.
Yeah, that's great. I think we're going to go to a break right now, but we'll be back with more from Kim Brouzes. So we're back with Kim Brouzes. Kim, we know that outside of your career in athletic therapy, you're also an entrepreneur with active therapy and move medicine. We wanted to talk to you about Kinmetrix because it's a bit of a departure from those other 2 businesses. What made you want to jump into that world, especially in the world of tech?
That's a really good question, because if anybody knows me, they know that I'm the least tech savvy person on the planet. I barely know how to use my phone. But I started actually understanding the need for it in the non-AUK and AUK world, not actually sport world. So in I'm going to say probably 2020, 2021, somewhere in there, we were granted the valet contract. So we have the non-AUK and the occupational injuries. And all of a sudden, they wanted us to record how many injuries, were they shoulders, knees, elbows, whatever, how many days off. And I'm thinking, I don't do this kind of stuff. I go to work, I work on my athletes, I do my charting, but I don't do data collection. And then they're like, but we need to know. And I'm like, shoot. So I slowly started to realize that I'm going to have to understand how to collect. Do I do spreadsheets? So it was starting in that world. And then my athletes would come home, whether it was the NHL or whatever, athletes would come home and they had wearable tech. I'm like, what are those things? Right? And they're monitoring, their oxygen utilization. They're monitoring what muscles are using and what the lactic acid thresholds are. And I'm like, holy cannolis. So it was kind of like, it was either I was going to jump in or I was eventually going to be taken over by the industry that did understand tech and did utilize it in their daily, treatments and stuff. So started, reaching out to Vald and Soma and these technologies that are above and beyond what we would use, but the pro teams are using them. And I've done a lot of talks. I've done talks at the NFL. I've talked, talks at the NHL level, the NCAA level. And the thing I always reiterate is that they've managed to figure out how to build a monster from the shoulders down. And I mean, these athletes are spectacular humans, but they don't know how to do that with the neck and above, right? So the sport tech, the wearable tech, I was recently at an NFL event and they were talking about the mouth guards that are now out there to signal that the impact was great enough to possibly have a concussion. And the NFL also has committees, and there's one that's the Head, Neck, and Spine Committee by Dr. Ellis, and that basically is a bunch of really smart engineers that are looking at these helmets, and now the receivers are going to wear a different helmet than the linemen, and then a different helmet than the kicker. And they've studied the forces and the directions of these forces to try to create helmets that will reduce the impact to the brain. So it's actually been a passion. Like, it wasn't anything I knew anything about. I was happy in my lane and happy doing what I do. But then I realized that there's a whole world out there that's making really big changes, and changes for the good for these athletes. So I jumped on board.
And I think so much of this is just resonating with me, but I want you to talk a bit more about Kinmetrix ARC platform specifically, because I think we want to be able to tell the audience, about specifically, the tech that you're involved with now. So how does that work? Where does that idea come from, and just where are you at with the technology?
So about 2020, I would say Dr. Dennis Reich, who is an entrepreneurial physician in Sudbury, and who is a strong reason why we have this beautiful little ecosystem of companies coming north, and is specifically coming to Sudbury. He had pitched it to me. I wasn't quite there yet though, and it was, the founder is Dr. Bill Smith. He's a chiropractor from Eastern Canada, and he actually, his story quickly is, he had a patient who was heading across Canada on a motorcycle trip, and she had chronic neck pain, and he's like, I don't know how you're going to do this. And her helmet was a little too big. So obviously the first leg of this caused her a great deal of pain, but by the time she was finished, her pain was gone and she was good. And he basically figured that was because she strengthened her neck. There's that bobblehead effect, right? So he started working with robotic sensors, and at the time, augmented reality. So the original prototype had VR glasses. And I saw it, they pitched, and then in about 2022, I was like, okay, I'm really intrigued by this. And his original thought and his original idea for this was that if we can strengthen the neck, we will see a reduction in concussions. We can't claim that, we haven't proven it. But that was what he thought he wanted this device to do. So fast forward to about 2023, late 2023, we rebranded to Kinmetrix from the name Necktronics. The reason we did that is because our patents allow us to do this data collection with sensors and robotics for any place in the body. So we can do any joint. Started with the neck because it's the most complicated. And now we have removed the augmented reality of the VR glasses. And the reason we're doing this is because there's no normative pool of data anywhere in the world for how strong a neck should be. So when we had the Craftville game here in Sudbury, and Pittsburgh Penguins played against Ottawa Senators, obviously I was involved, and I was helping with the Penguins. So the head strength coach asked me, what's a strong neck? And I'm like, we don't know. We don't know if Crosby has a strong enough neck. Looks like it, but we don't know. And people are starting to realize that we actually have no metrics at all. So there's some research out there that says, one particular says for every pound of increase in neck strength, we'll see a reduction by 5% in reduction in concussions. And there's another one with extension strength with a reduction of 13%. The problem is when meta-analysis grabs all this data, they realize that these devices were built in garages or institutions, and they're not consistent and they're not accurate. The Kinmetrix ARC is the only device in the world that can accurately and consistently collect data. It is, it looks like a chair. It is a chair. There is a robotic arm that can do 360 degrees. So if a team or an athlete says, I want to do 272 degrees, we can do that. We can do isometric, we can do isokinetic. So isometric is against firm hold, isokinetic is with range, and we can do all that. And every time someone sits in the chair, the sensor that they are going to push against collects data. The other thing is that this is not a plated system. We're not doing this little key and we're doing every 5 to 10 degrees of increase in strain, in resistance rather. It's digital resistance. So we can put 1 pound, we can do 15 pounds. So it's the only device that can do that. And then with the software play, which of course is Bernie Aho. He is our VP of product, and just brilliant on the front of the software. I do want to do a shout out to MID. MID is engineering them here in Sudbury, and they have taken a very big blue machine and made it slick and black and shiny and beautiful.
It's sharp.
It's sharp, right? And we actually, I can't say which team, but we have it in the NFL currently. They're using it, so I've seen it in their space, and it is spectacular. The software is designed here as well in Sudbury, and they have made it autonomous. So Bernie and his team, you do an assessment, and the assessment will then figure out the old days. You probably remember we used to say, okay, 60% of your max will be strength, 70 to 80 might be power. Well, this machine does it for you. The calculation, I don't want to say dummy proof, but is dummy proof. So originally when I took this device, we thought a clinician would have to be at the helm. But now it basically, they do their assessment and the device will figure out their strengthening program from there.
We're gonna have to take a quick break. But when we get back, we're gonna talk more about the application of the ARC, because I think Steve and I have some great questions we want to ask you. So we'll be right back. So we're back with Kim Brouzes. Kim, you're describing the ARC technology from Kinmetrix, and I got to see the technology in action at the triple header pitch event at NORCAT before the holidays of last year, and then over that holiday break, I got an F1 like in a big way. I crushed like all 7 seasons of Drive to Survive, read a bunch of F1 books. I'm now an F1 fan, and as I'm watching the show, which again, F1 is the pinnacle of motorsports. Like, these guys have so much technology at their disposal, and yet I'm watching these behind the scenes shots of they're doing these neck strengthening exercises, and then I go to the movies this summer and I see the F1 movie with Brad Pitt, and he's strengthening his neck in the movie by, he gets on the floor and he puts his head on the couch, so he's in like this like almost a 45-degree angle, just putting pressure on his neck. So the first one is, this must make you cringe as an athletic therapist, but also F1 has to adopt this technology given how advanced they are and how much money there is to go around in that sport. This just seems like a no-brainer to me, but that's just me as a new F1 fan thinking they should buy your product.
Very loud F1 fan.
Very loud.
No, I'm with you. I knew very little about the F1 as a sport, because an AT fixes bodies, not machines, right? And an F1 driver is a machine. I've had the privilege and honor of working with Peter Bulsink from Maverick. He's in the Netherlands, and he is one of Max Verstappen's coaches. And I've learned a lot about what the body has to endure. When I saw Top Gun, when I was in high school, and you've got, he's doing this, and there's no G-forces in the movies whatsoever. I've learned that that's not true. And the interesting thing with talking, so I've done 2 or 3 podcasts with Peter, and learning a lot about the demands. And yes, so typically what they would do is they would hold the head of the driver, and they would be on somewhat of an angle, and they would require an isometric hold. So they have to spend, let's say it's 2 hours, they don't blink, they can't, there's no body process that could take their cognitive awareness away from the track, because they would go into the wall. And so they need long duration isometric training, which is why you see this almost looks barbaric. But that is in fact what they do. So we are hoping that we are in talks, obviously. The difficulty with Formula One, as opposed to, let's say, an NFL team, is they're all over the world. And we are looking at obviously making our device eventually more portable and that. But yeah, no, they're definitely looking at adopting obviously the Kinmetrix ARC, and we're hoping to create some less barbaric measures.
Because I think you probably mentioned F1 on the pitch, but then as like seeing the tech and then seeing it in real, I'm like, I understand this now. Like, this makes sense. And they'll actually get data. So they're going to know Lewis Hamilton. They're going to know these young guys who, I actually spoke to Peter not long ago about a concussion. I'm like,
do they get concussions? And they just said it recently had a female driver sustain a concussion. Their concussions aren't minor, obviously, right? They're going into the walls. And I was like, oh, okay. So they're aware, we're in there, we're having discussions, and hopefully we'll be able to be a part of their training.
Yeah.
I want to, as an NFL fan, I want to shoehorn back in a question because I did see that you're at the
Combine?
You're at the Combine, and you said that you might have a story about your time at the Combine?
Yes. So I know the NHL world, and basically, typically in the NHL, you deal with the teams, the medical teams, and maybe the athlete. But very seldom do I have conversations with agents. So we go to the Combine, and we have the device there, and we're doing demos for all the NFL teams. So this gentleman comes up, and he looked homeless to me, just baggy clothes, hair disheveled, and this, big wad of chewing tobacco. And I thought, I'm laughing, thinking, oh, this is the NFL world, because again, it's new to me. And very, very polite, very nice man talking about concussions. And then he was whisked away. So my husband Patrick was there, and he's like, Kim, that was the coolest thing ever. And I thought, the homeless guy? And in my head, I'm thinking, yeah, Indianapolis would have homeless people, And he's like, no. He goes, you saw the movie Jerry Maguire? And I'm like, of course I saw the movie Jerry Maguire. He's like, that was Jerry Maguire. I was like, shut the front door, get out of it. Really? And he's like, I think that's Lee Steinberg. And I'm like, Googling Lee Steinberg. I'm like, I don't know. So I leave the Combine, and I'm walking back, and this gentleman is standing there, and I thought, I'm going to go talk to him just in the off chance. So I crossed the street, and Canadian as I am, I said, I'm sorry, we didn't finish our conversation. And he said, I'm Lee Steinberg. And he's like, so we start talking about the concussion and how he would like our device at the Super Bowl to test the athletes before the Super Bowl. And we talked about how he's bundling some of this health tech to teams to sell them in bundles. And I was like, I almost missed this opportunity because I thought he was homeless. And lo and behold, it was Lee Steinberg. So it was a really good learning curve, right? Because again, it wasn't a world that I was aware of. And shortly after that, I was approached by several of the agents looking for the devices on behalf of their athletes, as opposed to not just the teams, right? Everybody was there. The interesting thing with the NFL is they have the most public problem with concussions, right? And CTE, that's at the end of the tongue of everybody that works in football. And they are doing, from the little bit I've learned, they're doing a hell of a job finding solutions to these problems, and hopefully we'll be part of it.
That's great.
Did you tell Lee, show me the money after he had his plans for getting?
I was just so thrown
How many
by
times have you
right?
heard that, right?
I should have. But no, what a wonderful man. Man. He's not homeless.
No,
certainly not.
We wanted to leave you with the last word to talk about what we, not Lee. No.
No, I thought you were going to do that.
No, yeah, don't worry. Okay. So I'm a professional, kind of. But we'll leave you with the last word to talk about what's next for you and your companies that you're working with. But before we do that, we talked about how you treated Steve back in the day off camera.
Yes.
Was Steve one of the screamers? Did he cry? And we know that he looks big and tough, but we know that on the inside.
One time we did his back, and I'll say there were noises definitely.
Oh, no.
noises then.
We're gonna clip that.
Yeah, my lower back. Yeah.
So what's for me? So last year at the age of 51, believe it or not, I was asked to do a talk by Connor LaRocque, and it was how to stay relevant with AI and all these things changing. And I kind of realized when I went to do the talk that at some point in your life we'll all know our superpowers. And believe it or not, it isn't treating. I realized then that it's somewhere between the educational piece and what I do, right? So I definitely love doing the podcasts, and I'm doing I'm on a panel with amazing people like LeBron James trainer in Miami in October. So these kinds of things are definitely something I want to pursue more of. Thankfully, I am seen as an expert in my field, so I get access to that kind of thing. I do want to see Kinmetrix change the world. I do want to see us be part of that normative data pool. I want to see us. We have had some discussions with the Department of Defense in the U.S. for their fighter pilots. which basically are very similar to F1 drivers. You know, even though the world is crazy, I still want to see us helping as many as we can, getting in more Formula One. UFC is another project we're working on, NHL as well. And then eventually, I would like to see that trickle-down effect. So we are, I mean, it's always fun and glorious to talk about the professionals, but in a perfect world, these would be in gyms, they would be in high schools, they would be in university settings. So we are looking at, you know, creating other devices that are less costly and easier to place. And in that way, you know, we're seeing a reduction in concussions. The other anecdotal thing we saw, and we weren't looking for it, because again, we brought the concussion piece, even though we can't claim it, from the original founder. And when we have had people in the device, we're seeing a reduction in neck pain, headaches, migraines, anecdotally, obviously, we can't prove it, but we're seeing an increase in spatial awareness and things like that. So I think this will also be seen as a performance device and not just a reduction in concussion. I think this will be in the gyms of many teams and facilities.
I can't think of a better place to leave it.
That's great. We look
Kim
forward to seeing
Brouzes,
that.
we look forward to seeing that and then seeing the continued success, and thanks so much for coming.
Thank you for having me.
Thanks.